history is supposed to be a story we know. We learn about the Stone Age, then the Bronze Age. We learn about empires rising and falling. It feels like a straight line. A neat progression from simple tools to complex technology. But what if it's not? What if there are pieces of the puzzle that just don't fit? Things dug up from the earth that feel like they belong to a different time, a different story. Imagine finding a 2,000-year-old computer in a Roman shipwreck, or a map from the 1500s that seems to show Antarctica without any ice, or a 12,000-year-old temple built by people who weren't supposed to know how to build anything at all. These aren't science fiction. These are real objects. They sit in museums or have been studied by scientists, and they quietly challenge everything we think we know about our past. They are the glitches in the timeline. The footnotes in history books that should be headlines. They force us to ask some uncomfortable questions. Were our ancestors smarter than we give them credit for? Were there lost civilizations with technology we can't explain? Or is there another story of humanity that we are only just beginning to uncover? These are the finds that defy easy answers. They don't fit the narrative, and they keep archaeologists up at night. Number 19, what ancient message is hidden in the Sajama lines? In the high plains of western Bolivia, there's a landscape that looks like it was sketched on by giants. Thousands of perfectly straight lines are etched into the earth. They go on for miles. Some are just a few feet wide. Others are much wider. They crisscross each other, forming a massive, sprawling network. These are the Sajama lines. They are one of the largest pieces of land art in the world. And we have almost no idea why they were made. The lines were created by scraping away the dark, oxidized surface of the desert floor to reveal the lighter soil underneath. It was a simple method, but the scale of the project is staggering. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania used satellite imagery to map the lines in the early 2000s. People like Amy Plasalka and Clark Erickson were part of this effort. They estimated that the total length of the lines is around 16,000 kilometers. That's almost 3 times the width of the United States. The entire network covers an area of 22,000 square kilometers. And it's all centered around the Sajama volcano, a sacred mountain to the indigenous people. The people who made these lines lived in the region for nearly 3,000 years before the arrival of the Inca and long before the Spanish. They did this without modern surveying equipment, without aerial views, yet the lines are remarkably straight. They run over hills and through valleys, never wavering from their path. Some lines converge on specific points like small shrines or burial towers called chulpas. This suggests they had a ceremonial or religious purpose. Maybe they were pathways for pilgrimages, sacred roads connecting sacred places, but that theory doesn't explain everything. Why so many lines? Why the complex, grid-like pattern in some areas? Some of the lines seem to point to nothing at all. They just stop in the middle of nowhere. The sheer amount of labor is also hard to comprehend. It would have taken generations of people working together to create this massive network. What belief system could inspire such a long-term, large-scale project? The local Aymara people today hold the area as sacred, but the original meaning of the lines has been lost to time. We can only guess. Unlike the nearby Nazca lines in Peru, the Sajama lines don't form clear pictures of animals or symbols. They are pure geometry, a massive abstract drawing on the face of the earth. And because they are so subtle, they went largely unnoticed by the outside world for centuries. They are so big, you can't really appreciate them from the ground. You need to be in the sky. So how did the people who made them conceptualize the final design? How did they maintain such precision over such vast distances? It's a testament to a forgotten system of engineering and cosmology, a system we don't understand. What spiritual map were they trying to draw on the land? Did each line represent a family, a prayer, or a journey to the afterlife? If they were pilgrimage paths, why did they need thousands of them, often running parallel to each other? And how did they keep the lines so perfectly straight without a view from above? Number 18 are the Quimbaya artifacts, ancient airplanes. In the Gold Museum in Bogota, Colombia, there is a collection of small gold objects. They are about 2 inches long. They were made by the Quimbaya civilization, a culture that lived in Colombia around 1000 CE. Officially, they are labeled as zoomorphic figures. This means they are meant to be stylized representations of birds, insects, or fish. But when you look at them, they don't look much like any animal you know. They look like airplanes. These objects, often called the Quimbaya artifacts or golden jets, have all the parts of a modern aircraft. They have a central fuselage, they have wings that are straight and rigid, not curved like a bird's. They have a tail fin, a stabilizer. It's an uncanny resemblance. The wings are delta-shaped, similar to a Concorde or a modern fighter jet. The tail is even more specific. It's a vertical stabilizer like a rudder. Birds and insects don't have tails like that. It's a feature specifically designed for aerodynamic stability in flight. The ancient astronaut theory, popularized by writers like Erich von Däniken in his 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods, latched onto these artifacts. The idea is that these are not just artistic interpretations, they are models of real flying machines that the Quimbaya people witnessed. Maybe they saw visitors from another world, or maybe there was a lost human civilization with advanced technology. It's a sensational idea, but it's based on a visual resemblance that is hard to ignore. In the late 1990s, two German aviation experts, Peter Belting and Konrad Lubbers, decided to test the theory. They built scaled-up radio-controlled models based on the exact dimensions of one of the golden artifacts. They didn't change the design, they just made it bigger and added an engine and a propeller. The result was surprising. The model flew, and it flew perfectly. It was stable, fast, and capable of complex aerobatic maneuvers. Their experiment seemed to prove that the ancient design was, in fact, aerodynamically sound. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a blueprint for a functioning aircraft. Mainstream archaeologists and historians disagree, of course. They argue that this is a classic case of pareidolia. That's when we see familiar patterns like faces or airplanes in random shapes. They maintain that the objects are stylized flying fish or insects. They point out that some of the artifacts have eyes and mouths, features that don't belong on an airplane. But the proponents of the ancient aircraft theory say these could be artistic additions. The core design, they argue, is too mechanically precise to be a coincidence. The shape of the wings and the structure of the tail are not found together in any known flying animal. So we are left with a simple, unsettling object, a small piece of gold that looks like something it shouldn't. It's either a remarkable coincidence, a testament to how the shape of a fish can mimic a high-tech aircraft, or it's evidence that the Quimbaya people saw something in the sky 1,000 years ago, something that inspired them to create a perfect miniature replica. If they are just stylized animals, why don't they look more like any known animal from that region? Why did the creators choose a design with such specific functional aerodynamic features? And if a scaled-up model flies perfectly, can we really dismiss the original as just a piece of art? Number 17, why do the Paracas skulls look so strange? In the 1920s, a Peruvian archaeologist named Julio Tello was excavating in the Paracas desert of Peru. He uncovered a massive and elaborate graveyard. Inside, he found tombs filled with the remains of a mysterious people. The Paracas culture flourished around 2,000 years ago, but what Tello found was not normal. The skulls he unearthed were unlike any human skulls he had ever seen. They were huge, and they were elongated. These were not just slightly misshapen. The Paracas skulls have a cranial volume that is, in some cases, up to 25% larger than a modern human skull. The shape is also dramatically different. A normal human skull is made of 3 main plates. The Paracas skulls have only 2. This isn't a result of deformation. It's a structural genetic difference. For decades, the explanation was that this was a result of artificial cranial deformation. This is a practice where a child's head is bound with cloth or boards to change its shape as it grows. Many ancient cultures did this, including some in Peru. It was a sign of nobility or social status. But that explanation has a major problem. Head binding can change the shape of a skull. It cannot increase its volume or its weight. It just redistributes the existing mass. The Paracas skulls are not just shaped differently, they are fundamentally bigger and heavier. The bone is thicker, the entire structure is different. It's like comparing a regular car to a stretch limousine. The limo is not just bent, it's built with more material on a larger frame. In 2014, the story took a strange turn. Brian Forster, a researcher who runs the Paracas History Museum, sent samples from some of the skulls for DNA testing. The initial results, released by an anonymous geneticist, were shocking. The report claimed that the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, had mutations unknown in any human, primate or animal known so far. The geneticist reportedly said he was not sure what he was looking at. He suggested the Paracas might be a new type of human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens. This created a huge amount of excitement and controversy. The claims were sensational. But they were also poorly documented. The testing was not done as part of a formal, peer-reviewed study. The geneticist remains anonymous. Mainstream science has largely ignored these results, dismissing them as pseudoscience. More conventional studies suggest the Paracas people were genetically consistent with other Native American populations. But those studies often focus on skulls with clear signs of artificial deformation, not the most extreme and anomalous examples. So the mystery remains. We have a collection of skulls that are anatomically different from our own. They are not just deformed, they are built differently. The official explanation doesn't account for the increased size and different plate structure. The alternative explanations involve new human species or even alien-human hybrids, but they lack rigorous scientific proof. The skulls themselves are the only hard evidence, and they sit in a museum challenging our understanding of the human story. And if it was just head binding, where did the extra cranial volume and bone mass come from? Why do some of the skulls have a different number of cranial plates, a fundamental genetic trait? And if the preliminary DNA test showed something truly anomalous, why hasn't there been a major, transparent, peer-reviewed study to either confirm or debunk it once and for all? Number 16 is the Kaimanawa Wall, a man-made relic. In the middle of New Zealand's North Island, deep within the Kaimanawa Forest Park, there's a strange rock formation. At first glance, it looks like a natural cliff face, but if you look closer, you see something that seems impossible. The rock is formed into large, smooth blocks. They are stacked in regular courses, like bricks in a wall. The lines between the blocks are perfectly straight, both horizontally and vertically. It looks ancient, and it looks man-made. This is the Kaimanawa Wall. The wall was brought to public attention in the 1990s. The story is that a tramper stumbled upon it and recognized its artificial appearance. It sparked a huge debate in New Zealand. Could this be the remnant of a pre-Maori civilization? The standard history of New Zealand says that the first settlers, the Maori, arrived from Polynesia around 1300 CE. There is no archaeological evidence of anyone living there before them. A massive ancient stone wall would rewrite that history completely. Geologists were quick to study the formation. The official consensus, led by people like Peter Wood of the Institute of Geological and Nuclear Sciences, is that the wall is a natural phenomenon. The rock is a 330,000-year-old ignimbrite lava flow. The block-like shapes are the result of natural fracturing, a process called columnar jointing. As the thick lava flow cooled, it contracted and cracked. This created straight, vertical, and horizontal fractures. Over thousands of years, erosion has weathered these cracks, making them look like mortar joints between cut stones. In short, geologists say it's a coincidence, a trick of nature that looks like human handiwork. But not everyone is convinced. Proponents of the man-made theory point to the incredible regularity of the blocks. The corners are sharp, almost perfect right angles. The surfaces are remarkably flat. It looks too neat, too organized to be a random act of geology. They argue that geologists are too quick to dismiss it. They say it's an attempt to protect the established historical narrative. Some have even suggested a connection to other mysterious stone structures around the world, part of a global lost civilization. The site is controversial. The New Zealand government has protected it, partly because it is on land that is spiritually significant to the local Maori iwi tribe, Ngati Tuharetoa. Access is restricted. This has fueled conspiracy theories that authorities are trying to hide the truth. There has been no major archaeological dig at the base of the wall. Such a dig could settle the question. If it's man-made, there would likely be tool marks, discarded debris, or other signs of human activity buried at its base. If it's natural, the rock formation should continue down into the ground. Without that crucial excavation, we are left with two conflicting stories. The story from geology says it's a natural wonder, a beautiful accident of cooling lava. The story from its appearance says it's a relic of a lost people, a piece of history we didn't know existed. The stones themselves are silent. Why does this natural formation look so much more regular and block-like than other examples of columnar jointing around the world? If a proper archaeological dig could potentially solve the mystery, why has one never been authorized? Is the refusal to excavate truly about cultural sensitivity, or is it about protecting a historical narrative that the wall threatens to upend? Number 15, who carved the Long U grottos? In 1992, in a small village in Zhejiang province, China, a local man named Wu Anai made a curious decision. He wanted to know how deep the local ponds were. They were said to be bottomless. He and some neighbors bought a water pump and started draining one. For 17 days, they pumped water out. As the water level dropped, something incredible was revealed. It wasn't a pond. It was the flooded entrance to a massive man-made cave. This was the first of the Longyu grottos. What they found was just the beginning. Eventually, 24 of these underground chambers were discovered. They are huge. The average floor space of each grotto is over 1,000 square meters. The ceilings reach up to 30 meters high. It's estimated that almost 1 million cubic meters of rock were excavated to create them. And this was all done by hand. The entire complex is a massive, subterranean world carved out of solid siltstone. The craftsmanship is breathtaking. The walls and ceilings are covered in parallel tool marks. They were left by chisels. The marks are uniform, almost like a machine did the work. They are all set at a 60-degree angle to the main axis of the cave. This creates a strange corduroy-like texture across every surface. The stone pillars that support the roof are perfectly distributed to prevent collapse. The engineering is brilliant. Whoever built these grottos knew exactly what they were doing. Here's the problem. There is no historical record of their construction. Not a single document. Not a mention in any local history or legend. It's as if they never existed. Based on the style of pottery found inside, archaeologists date the grottos to the Qin dynasty around 200 BCE. That was over 2,200 years ago. So who built them and why? The theories are all over the place. Some say it was a quarry for building materials, but if so, where did all the stone go? There are no nearby structures built from this type of siltstone, and why would a quarry be so intricately carved and decorated? Others suggest it was a secret military base for an emperor, or a hidden palace, or a massive tomb. But there are no bodies, no artifacts, no signs of anyone ever living there. The floors are clean. The tool marks are another deep mystery. The uniform pattern across thousands of square meters suggests a consistent method. But how did they achieve it? And why? Was it purely decorative? Or did it have some functional purpose we don't understand? How did they work in the dark? The caves are pitch black. There are no signs of fire or soot on the walls or ceilings, which would be expected if they used torches. The Longyu grottos are a monument to a colossal effort. It would have taken thousands of people many years to complete. A project of this scale should have been recorded. Emperors and dynasties love to document their great works. But the construction of this underground city is a complete blank in Chinese history. It is a massive silent piece of engineering that shouldn't be there. How did the builders maintain such precise angles and patterns in total darkness? Why was a project of this immense scale kept completely secret with no written records left behind? And what was the purpose of these huge, empty, and beautifully carved underground halls? Number 14. What was the Roman dodecahedron for? Across Europe, from Wales to Hungary, archaeologists have found a strange object. It's a small hollow geometric shape, has 12 flat pentagonal faces. Each face has a circular hole in it, usually of a different size, and on each corner there is a small knob or stud. They are usually made of bronze. They are called Roman dodecahedrons. Around 120 of them have been found, and nobody has any idea what they were used for. These objects date from the 2nd to the 4th century CE. They are found in the northern provinces of the Roman Empire in Gaul and Germania. Curiously, they are not found in the Italian heartland or the eastern parts of the empire. This suggests they were a cultural object specific to the Gallo-Roman world. They are often found in coin hoards, suggesting they were valuable. Some have been found in military camps, as others in public bathhouses and graves. The contexts are too varied to give a clear clue to their function. The biggest mystery is the complete lack of any written description of them in Roman sources. Not a single text, poem, or historical record mentions them. It's as if they were a common object that everyone knew the purpose of, so nobody bothered to write it down. Or they were part of a secret practice that was never documented. The theories are endless, and none of them are perfect. Some people think it was a candlestick holder. You could put candles in the holes, but wax residue has only been found on one example. And the uneven size of the holes makes it an unstable design. Another theory is that it was a measuring device, a kind of surveying tool or rangefinder for Roman artillery. By looking through opposite holes, you could estimate the distance to an object of a known size. This is plausible, but it's a very complex way to do something that could be done with simpler tools. Other ideas are more exotic. Maybe it was a toy for children, a kind of dice for a lost game. But they seem too ornate and complex for a simple toy. Maybe it was a religious object, a scepter head for a priest of a Celtic cult that was absorbed into Roman culture. The 12 faces could represent the zodiac or the months of the year. This is a popular idea, but there's no direct evidence to support it. One of the most practical sounding theories is that it was a knitting tool for making Roman gloves. By looping yarn around the knobs, you could knit the fingers of a glove. A replica was successfully used to do this. But again, why are there no records? And why the complex hollow shape? The Roman dodecahedron is a perfect mystery. It's a complex, precisely made object. It was clearly important to the people who owned it. But its function is a complete blank. Every theory has a hole in it. Literally. It's an artifact that invites speculation because it offers so few clues. It is a small bronze question mark left behind by the Romans. Why have they only been found in the northern parts of the Roman Empire? If they were a common tool, a toy, or a religious item, why is there not a single written mention of them in all of Roman literature? And with so many plausible but unprovable theories, what simple, obvious function might we be overlooking entirely? Number 13. What does a Fuente Magna bowl say? In the 1950s, a farmer working near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia found a large stone bowl. It was beautifully carved, brownish-gray in color. It was intricately decorated with carvings of anthropomorphic figures, zoomorphic motifs, and a strange script. The object came to be known as the Fuente Magna bowl. For decades, it sat in a local museum, mostly forgotten. Then, in the late 1990s, researchers took a closer look at the writing inside it. And what they found was impossible. The script inside the bowl appeared to be Sumerian cuneiform. The Sumerians were one of the earliest civilizations in the world. They lived in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. They invented writing, the wheel, and the city-state. And they did all this around 3000 BCE. They were separated from Bolivia by 12,000 kilometers of land and ocean, and by thousands of years. There is no accepted historical evidence of any contact between the ancient Near East and South America. So how did Sumerian writing end up on a bowl found near the highest navigable lake in the world? The discovery was championed by researchers like Clyde Winters, an American author, and Bernardo Beatos, a Bolivian archaeologist. They claimed they had successfully translated the cuneiform. According to their translation, the bowl was used for a ritual to a Sumerian goddess. It describes a libation and offering to ensure fertility and good fortune. They also identified a second script on the bowl, which they said was from the local Aymara people, written in a Proto-Sumerian alphabet. This suggested a direct link, a fusion of two cultures that should never have met. The idea is radical. It suggests that Sumerian sailors crossed the Atlantic thousands of years before Columbus, that they traveled up the Amazon River and made their way high into the Andes Mountains. There, they interacted with the local Pucara civilization, the predecessors of Tiwanaku. It's a story of transoceanic contact that would completely upend our understanding of the ancient world. But the mainstream academic community is highly skeptical. Most archaeologists and linguists have dismissed the Fuente Magna bowl as a hoax, or at best, a misunderstanding. They argue that the cuneiform is not authentic, and that it's just a collection of random marks that vaguely resemble Sumerian script. They say the translation by Winters and Beatos is not credible and has not been accepted by any mainstream Sumerologist. They point out that the bowl has no clear provenance. We don't know exactly where it was found or in what archaeological context. Without that, it's impossible to date it accurately or verify its authenticity. The bowl itself is the only piece of evidence. It exists. It has strange writing on it. Two groups of people look at that writing and see two completely different things. One sees proof of an impossible journey in a lost chapter of human history. The other sees meaningless scratches, likely carved much more recently to create a fake artifact. The debate is polarized. There is no middle ground. And because the object is so controversial, it hasn't received the kind of rigorous, widespread academic study that might settle the question. Is the writing on the bowl genuine Sumerian cuneiform, and if so, how did it get to Bolivia? If it is a modern forgery, who made it and for what purpose? And why does the academic world seem so unwilling to seriously engage with an object that, if real, could be one of the most important archaeological finds in history? Number 12. Did the ancient Egyptians have electric light? In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, there is a strange and famous carving. On the wall of a dark crypt, there is a large relief. It depicts several figures standing around a huge, transparent bulb-like object. Inside the bulb, a long, wavy snake is shown extending from a lotus flower. The bulb itself is attached to a base that looks like a socket, and a cable or tube runs from that base to a box or generator-like object, which a figure seems to be attending to. The whole image looks uncannily like a giant light bulb. Specifically, it looks like a Crookes tube, an early type of electrical discharge tube. This is the Dendera light. The carving dates back to the Ptolemaic period of ancient Egypt around the 1st century BCE. The temple itself is much older. The official Egyptological explanation is that the image is purely mythological. It's a symbolic representation of the creation of the world according to Egyptian beliefs. The bulb is the womb of the sky goddess Nut. The lotus flower is a symbol of creation. The snake is the serpent god Harsamtis, a form of the sun god Ra, being born from the flower. The cable is just the stem of the lotus. It's a standard piece of religious iconography, but proponents of alternative theories see something very different. People like Eric von Daniken have argued that this is not a symbol. It's a schematic, a diagram of a real working electrical device. They point to several clues. The Egyptians were masters of engineering. They built the pyramids, but how did they work inside the sealed tombs and chambers in total darkness? The traditional answer is that they used oil lamps or torches, but the ceilings of most tombs have no soot marks. None at all. This is a real archaeological puzzle. Some have suggested they used a complex system of polished copper mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into the tombs. This is possible, but it would have been incredibly difficult and inefficient. The electric light theory offers a simple solution. If they had a source of clean, sootless light, they could work anywhere. Could the nearby Baghdad battery, another mysterious artifact from the same era, be a clue? It was a simple clay pot with a copper cylinder and an iron rod that could have produced a small electrical charge. Perhaps the Egyptians had a much more advanced version of this technology. The bulb in the relief is even shown with a filament, the snake. In a Crookes tube, the electrical discharge often looks like a wavy, serpentine light. The resemblance is striking. Skeptics argue that this is just reading modern technology into ancient art. There is no other archaeological evidence for electricity in ancient Egypt. No wires, no glass bulbs, no power source. The Dendera carving is the only piece of evidence, and it can be explained through mythology. They also point out that even if the Baghdad battery worked, it produced a tiny amount of power, not nearly enough to light a large bulb. So we have an image that can be read in two ways. It is either a beautiful, complex religious symbol, or it is a blueprint for a lost technology. One explanation fits neatly into our existing understanding of history. The other one shatters it. The lack of soot in the tombs remains a nagging, unsolved problem that gives the Dendera light theory a persistent spark of life. If the Egyptians used torches or lamps, where is the soot on the ceilings of the tombs? If the Dendera carving is purely mythological, why does it so closely resemble a specific piece of 19th century electrical equipment? Could the Egyptians have discovered a form of electricity and lighting that left no other archaeological trace behind? Number 11. What happened at Mohenjo-Daro? Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. It was located in what is now Pakistan. It flourished around 2500 BCE. It was a remarkably advanced city for its time. It had a grid-like layout, a sophisticated water and sewage system, and large public buildings. It was a hub of a civilization that stretched for hundreds of miles, and then around 1900 BCE, it was abandoned. The entire Indus Valley civilization collapsed. We don't know why, but some of the evidence found at Mohenjo-Daro points to a very strange and violent end. In the 1920s, when archaeologists like John Marshall first excavated the site, they found something disturbing. Skeletons were found lying in the streets. Some were found in houses. They weren't in graves. They were scattered, as if they had died suddenly where they fell. One group of skeletons, a man, a woman, and a child, were found huddled together on a staircase, seemingly trying to flee. They looked like victims of a sudden catastrophe, But what was it? There were no signs of a massive battle. Few weapons were found. The city wasn't burned down in a conventional fire. The skeletons didn't show signs of sword cuts or violent trauma. Something else happened. In one specific area, archaeologists found evidence of extreme heat. Pottery was fused together. Bricks were melted and vitrified. This means they were turned into a glass-like substance. This kind of vitrification requires incredibly high temperatures, over 1500 degrees Celsius. That's much hotter than a normal house fire or even a kiln. This is where the story gets really strange. In the 1960s, a researcher named David Davenport, an expert in Sanskrit, claimed to have found a passage in the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata, that described the event. The text speaks of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. It describes an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 1,000 suns. It talks about the aftermath, hair and nails falling out, pottery breaking without cause, and birds turning white. For Davenport and later for authors like Eric von Daniken, this sounded exactly like a description of a nuclear explosion. The vitrified rocks and the scattered skeletons were presented as physical evidence of an ancient atomic blast. The idea was that Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed in an ancient war that used weapons of incredible power. It's a sensational theory, and it has been widely debunked by the scientific community. Scientists have tested the radiation levels at Mohenjo-Daro. They are normal. The vitrified material is now believed to be the result of intense but conventional fires and pottery kilns, which could occasionally malfunction and reach very high temperatures. The skeletons are not all from the same time period. They were likely just normal burials from a later, poorer period of occupation that were not done in proper graves. But the story persists, because the end of the Indus Valley civilization is still a mystery. And the image of a city instantly wiped out is a powerful one. The mainstream explanation that the civilization declined due to climate change, shifting rivers, or disease seems too slow and quiet to explain the scattered skeletons and fused pottery. Even if the nuclear bomb theory is wrong, it points to a real anomaly. Something sudden and terrible seems to have happened at Mohenjo-Daro. We just don't know what it was. What could have created heat intense enough to vitrify brick and pottery in the open city? If the skeletons were just hurried burials, why were they left in the streets and on stairways? And why did one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world collapse so suddenly and completely, leaving behind a city that looks like the scene of a sudden disaster? Number 10. What is the Uffington White Horse looking at? On the side of a hill in Oxfordshire, England, there is a giant figure carved into the chalky ground. It's over 110 meters long. It's a highly stylized, abstract image of a horse. It's called the Uffington White Horse. It is by far the oldest chalk figure in Britain, and it's a complete enigma. For centuries, people thought it was a monument to King Alfred's victory over the Vikings in the 9th century, or that it was a representation of the horse of a Celtic god, but modern archaeology has revealed something much stranger. In the 1990s, archaeologists from Oxford University used a technique called optical stimulated luminescence. This method can tell you when the soil was last exposed to sunlight. They took samples from the deepest layers of the horse's body. The results were stunning. The horse was not from the Iron Age or the Saxon period. It was created in the late Bronze Age. The dates came back to somewhere between 1380 and 550 BCE. That makes it around 3,000 years old. This was a time before the Celts, as we know them, had even arrived in Britain. So, who made it and why? The design is very strange. It's elegant and abstract. It looks more like something you'd see on a Bronze Age coin or a piece of pottery than a realistic depiction of a horse. It's so stylized that for a long time, people weren't even sure it was a horse. Some thought it was a dragon or another mythical beast. The location is also significant. It's carved into a dramatic, steep slope next to an ancient prehistoric track called the Ridgeway, and it's right next to a hill fort called Uffington Castle. The horse is only fully visible from the air. From the ground, or even from the opposite side of the valley, the image is distorted and hard to make out. This has led to speculation about how it was designed and constructed. Did the builders have a small model that they scaled up using a grid system? Or is its real purpose not to be seen as a whole from the ground at all? The horse is part of a larger ritual landscape. There are dozens of prehistoric burial mounds, or barrows, nearby. One of them is a long barrow that dates back to the Neolithic period, long before the horse. The horse also requires constant maintenance. If it's not regularly scoured and re-chalked, the grass will grow over it and it will disappear in a few decades. The fact that it has survived for 3,000 years means that for generations, local people have held a festival or ritual to clean it. This tradition, called the scoring of the horse, was recorded as far back as the 17th century and continues to this day. A 3,000-year-old tradition of community maintenance is almost as amazing as the horse itself. But the original meaning has been lost. We are just repeating a ritual we no longer understand. Why would a Bronze Age community expend so much effort to create a massive piece of art that can only be properly seen from the sky? Was it a tribal symbol, a territorial marker meant to be seen by gods rather than people? And how has the tradition of maintaining it survived for 3 millennia through changes in culture, language, and religion? Number 9, was there writing in pre-Roman Britain? The story of writing in Britain is supposed to be simple. The Romans brought it with them in 43 CE. Before that, the Celtic tribes of Britain had a purely oral culture. They passed down their history, laws, and religion through spoken word memorized by druids. They didn't have a written alphabet of their own, but a controversial set of artifacts suggests this story might be wrong. The artifacts are related to an alphabet called Coelbren y Baird, which translates to the alphabet of the bards. The story of this alphabet comes from a Welsh scholar and forger named Iolo Morganwg, who lived in the late 18th century. He claimed to have discovered ancient manuscripts that describe this lost Druidic alphabet. According to his work, the ancient Welsh bards used this script to record their secret knowledge. The letters were simple stick-like figures designed to be easily carved into wood or stone. For a long time, Coelbren y Baird was dismissed by mainstream historians as a complete fabrication by Iolo. He was known to have invented a lot of ancient Welsh traditions, but then strange artifacts started turning up that seemed to support his claims. In the 20th century, researchers like Alan Wilson and Bahram Blackett began investigating historical accounts. They found evidence of several stone pillars and artifacts with inscriptions that looked like the Coelbren alphabet. One of the most famous examples is a wooden tablet found in a bog, which supposedly had Coelbren letters carved on it. Unfortunately, many of these key artifacts have been lost or are not available for independent scientific study. The most compelling and controversial piece of evidence comes from the United States. In 1829, in a burial mound in Grave Creek, West Virginia, excavators found a small, oval sandstone tablet. It was inscribed with about 25 characters. The Grave Creek stone has been a source of debate ever since. The symbols don't match any known Native American script. In the 1970s, a polymath named Barry Fell, who specialized in epigraphy, claimed he could read the inscription. He argued that the letters were from several ancient European alphabets, including a form of Coelbren. His translation suggested the mound was the tomb of a Welsh or Irish prince who had traveled to America long before Columbus. The mainstream archaeology rejects this completely. The Grave Creek stone is widely considered a hoax, a fake planted in the mound in the 19th century. They argue that Barry Fell's methods were unscientific, and his translations were based on wishful thinking. The idea of pre-Roman Welsh writing and of pre-Columbian Welsh explorers in America is seen as romantic nationalism, not serious history. And yet, the idea won't go away. The Coelbren alphabet is a persistent legend. The visual similarity between the symbols on the Grave Creek stone and the Coelbren alphabet is there. Wilson and Blackett claim to have identified dozens of other stones in Britain with similar markings. They argue that there's a conspiracy to suppress the true history of Britain. The debate is stuck. Without clear, testable, and authentic artifacts, the Coelbren y Baird remains in the realm of myth. But it's a myth that points to a tantalizing possibility that the ancient Britons had a secret script, a written tradition that was wiped out by the Romans and forgotten by history. Was Iolo Morganwg a brilliant forger who invented an entire system, or did he tap into a genuine, forgotten oral tradition about a real alphabet? Are the inscribed stones found across Britain and America genuine artifacts of a lost writing system, or are they just collections of random marks and modern fakes? Could there have been a literate pre-Roman civilization in Britain that has been completely erased from the history books? Number 8, who built the Yonaguni Monument? In 1986, a scuba diver named Kihachiro Aratake was exploring off the coast of Yonaguni, a small Japanese island. He was looking for a new spot to watch hammerhead sharks. What he found was something he could not explain. Under the water, there was a massive stone structure. It looked like a sunken pyramid. It was huge, about 50 meters long and 20 meters wide. It had giant flat terraces, sharp 90-degree angles, and what looked like enormous steps. It was covered in coral, but its shape was clearly artificial. This is the Yonaguni Monument. The discovery sparked an intense debate. Is this a natural rock formation, or is it a man-made structure? A lost city that sank beneath the waves thousands of years ago. Geologists like Robert Schoch from Boston University have studied the site. Schoch is known for his controversial theory that the Sphinx in Egypt is much older than believed. When he first visited Yonaguni, he was skeptical, but after diving on the site, he concluded that while some of the features might be natural, others were clearly man-made. He pointed to the perfect right angles, the straight lines, and two massive stone blocks that seemed to be carved and placed next to each other. He believes it is a terra work, a natural structure that was modified and shaped by human hands. Other geologists strongly disagree. They argue that the entire structure is natural. The rock is sandstone, which tends to break along straight plains. They say the regular shapes are the result of natural geological processes and erosion from strong ocean currents. They call it a classic example of geofact, a natural object that looks artificial. They point out that the monument is part of a larger rock mass, not built from separate blocks like a pyramid. But the story gets deeper. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus in Japan, has spent years mapping the site. He is convinced it is man-made. He claims to have identified not just one structure, but a complex of 10 structures. He sees a castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a stadium. He points to what he calls tool marks, carvings, and even a stone relief that he interprets as a face. He believes it is the remnant of a lost civilization from 5,000 years ago, a Japanese Atlantis that was submerged by a massive earthquake and tsunami. The date is a key part of the mystery. The structure had to have been built on dry land. The sea levels rose to their current height around 10,000 years ago. This means that if the Yonaguni Monument is man-made, it has to be at least that old. A 10,000-year-old city would be one of the oldest and most important archaeological sites in the world. It would predate the pyramids of Egypt by thousands of years. It would come from a time when humans were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers, not sophisticated city builders. The Japanese government has not officially recognized this site as a man-made artifact. It's not protected as a cultural heritage site. This leaves it in a kind of limbo. It's a major tourist attraction for divers, but it's not a formal archaeological site. The debate continues, with two groups of experts looking at the same set of rocks and seeing completely different things. Could natural geological forces really create a structure with so many apparently artificial features, including terraces, steps, and right angles? If it is man-made, how could a civilization from 10,000 years ago have organized the labor and technology to build such a massive monument? And what other lost cities might be waiting to be discovered under the oceans, hidden by the rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age? Number 7, who were the hunter-gatherers? That built a cathedral. For a long time, the story of civilization was simple. First, humans learned to farm. This was the Neolithic Revolution. Around 10,000 years ago, agriculture allowed people to settle down in one place. It created food surpluses. This led to villages, then cities, then complex societies with rulers, priests, and monumental architecture like temples. The order was clear: farming first, then temples. Göbekli Tepe, a site in southeastern Turkey, proves this story is wrong. In the 1960s, surveyors noticed a strange rounded hill in the landscape. They thought it was a medieval cemetery. The site was ignored for decades. Then, in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was re-examining the old survey data. He had a hunch. It was something much older. He started digging. What he uncovered changed our understanding of human history forever. Göbekli Tepe is a massive temple complex. It consists of dozens of huge T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in circles. The pillars are up to 6 meters tall and weigh as much as 20 tons. They are covered in intricate carvings of animals: foxes, lions, snakes, and scorpions. The shocking part is its age. Using radiocarbon dating, Schmidt and his team determined that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE. That makes it 11,600 years old. This is 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. It's 6,000 years older than the first pyramids. It was built in a world without pottery, without writing, without the wheel, and, most importantly, without agriculture. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. This is the find that defies all logic. How did nomadic or semi-nomadic people who had to constantly search for food organize the massive labor force needed to build this? Carving and moving 20-ton pillars from the quarry a few hundred meters away would have required hundreds of workers. They would have needed leaders to organize them. They would have needed to feed them. This implies a level of social complexity that hunter-gatherers were not supposed to have. Klaus Schmidt proposed a revolutionary idea. He said that maybe the old story is backward. Maybe it wasn't farming that led to temples and civilization. Maybe the desire to build a temple, a sacred meeting place, is what drove people to invent farming. The massive effort of building Göbekli Tepe would have required a stable food source. The hunter-gatherers might have started cultivating the wild grasses that grew nearby, like inkhorn wheat, to feed the workers. The world's first domesticated wheat strains are found just a few miles from Göbekli Tepe. It's possible that the world's first cathedral led to the world's first farm. The need for organized religion may have been the spark that ignited the Neolithic Revolution. Even more mysterious is what happened to the site. Around 8,000 BCE, after being used for over 1,000 years, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Its creators filled in the entire complex with dirt and debris, creating the artificial hill that preserved it for millennia. Why would they do this? Why would they intentionally bury their most sacred place? Was it a ritual act, or were they hiding it? We've only excavated about 5% of the site. Ground-penetrating radar shows that there are at least 16 more stone circles buried underground. What we've seen so far is just the tip of a massive ancient iceberg. What forgotten religion or belief system motivated prehistoric hunter-gatherers to undertake such a monumental construction project? Was the effort of building Göbekli Tepe the actual catalyst for the invention of agriculture, completely reversing our model of civilization? And why, after a millennium of use, did its builders meticulously and intentionally bury their entire sacred complex? Number 6. Does the Piri Reis map show a lost world? In 1929, a group of historians was working in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey. They found a fragment of a map. It was drawn on gazelle skin. The map was signed by a Turkish admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, and it was dated to the year 1513. The map shows the Atlantic Ocean, the coasts of Europe and Africa, and the coast of Brazil. For a map from 1513, it is remarkably accurate, but it also shows something that should not be there. In the bottom right corner, it shows a landmass that looks exactly like the coast of Antarctica. The problem is, Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820. That's over 300 years after Piri Reis drew his map. And there's an even bigger problem. The map seems to show the coastline of Antarctica under the ice. It depicts the Queen Maud Land coast as it would look without its massive ice cap, which is over a mile thick. We only managed to map this subglacial coastline in the 1950s using modern seismic survey equipment. So, how could it be on a map from 1513? Piri Reis himself wrote on the map that he didn't draw it from his own explorations. He said he compiled it from about 20 older source maps. Some of them were contemporary Portuguese maps. But others, he said, dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and some were even older. He claimed to have used a map that once belonged to Christopher Columbus. This suggests that Piri Reis had access to a library of ancient knowledge that has since been lost. The mystery was popularized by Professor Charles Hapgood in his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood and his students at Keene State College studied the map in detail. They argued that the map was incredibly advanced. It used a sophisticated map projection, centered on Cairo, which required a deep understanding of spherical trigonometry. Hapgood believed that the only way to explain the map's accuracy and its depiction of an ice-free Antarctica was to assume that it was based on source maps from a lost ancient civilization, and a civilization with advanced maritime and cartographic skills that existed during the last ice age, when the coast of Antarctica was indeed free of ice. This was thousands of years before any known civilization. The U.S. Air Force Map Unit studied the map in the 1960s at Hapgood's request. They confirmed that the map was surprisingly accurate and that the landmass shown did correspond to the subglacial coast of Queen Maud Land. But they couldn't explain how it was possible. Mainstream historians and cartographers have a much more mundane explanation. They argue that the supposed Antarctica is not Antarctica at all. They believe it is simply the southern coast of South America, which was not well explored at the time. The mapmaker just bent the coastline eastward to fit it on the page. They say Hapgood was seeing what he wanted to see. They also point out that the map has many errors. The Caribbean is distorted and many islands are in the wrong place. If it was from an advanced civilization, why would it have these mistakes? But the resemblance of that southern landmass to the real subglacial coast of Antarctica is hard to dismiss as a coincidence. The Piri Rise map remains a deeply controversial artifact. It is either a moderately accurate early 16th century map with a big imaginative mistake at the bottom, or it is a copy of a copy, a faint echo of a map from a time before recorded history showing a world that no longer exists. If the landmass is just a distorted South America, why does it so closely match the specific subglacial topography of Antarctica? If Piri Rice was using ancient source maps, what happened to them, and what other lost knowledge did they contain? Could there have been a global map-making civilization in the distant past that we know nothing about? Number 5. Why was the Baghdad Battery made? In 1936, workers excavating a village near Baghdad, Iraq, found a strange object. It was a small clay pot about 13 centimeters high. Inside the pot was a cylinder made of a sheet of copper, and suspended inside the copper cylinder, held in place by an asphalt stopper, was an iron rod. The object dated back to the Parthian period, sometime between 250 BCE and 224 CE. It looked simple, but a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig, who was the director of the National Museum of Iraq at the time, recognized what it could be. It looked exactly like a primitive battery. This became known as the Baghdad Battery. The design is simple but effective. If you fill the pot with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the iron rod and the copper cylinder act as electrodes. A chemical reaction takes place. The result is a small but steady electrical current. It's a galvanic cell, the same basic principle used in modern batteries, and it was created almost 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the first modern battery in 1800. Replicas of the Baghdad Battery have been built many times to see if it works. And it does. It can produce a voltage of between 0.5 and 2 volts. That's not a lot of power. You couldn't power a light bulb with it, but it's enough for other things. So the big question is not if it could produce electricity, but what it was used for. The most popular theory is that it was used for electroplating. This is a process where you use an electrical current to coat one metal with a thin layer of another. For example, you could plate a copper vase with a thin layer of gold or silver. This would have been a cheap and effective way to make beautiful objects for the nobility or for religious rituals. There are some artifacts from ancient Iraq that appear to be electroplated, but the evidence is not conclusive. Some scientists argue that these objects were gilded using a different method, with mercury. Another theory is that the batteries were used for medical purposes. The ancient Greeks knew that the electric shock from a torpedo fish could numb pain. Perhaps the Parthians had discovered a way to create a similar gentle electrical current for use in healing or acupuncture-like treatments. The small tingle from the battery could have been seen as a form of magic or divine energy. A third idea is more about religion and ritual. A priest could have used a series of these batteries to create a small electrical charge on a metal statue of a god. When a worshiper touched the statue, they would receive a small shock. This would have been a powerful and mysterious experience, a way to convince people they were in the presence of a real divine power. The mainstream archaeological view is much more skeptical. Many historians believe the Baghdad Battery wasn't a battery at all. They argue that it was simply a storage vessel for sacred scrolls. The copper cylinder would have protected the papyrus or parchment from degrading. The iron rod would have been used to wind the scroll. The acidic residue found inside could have come from the decomposition of the scroll itself. The problem with this theory is that no scrolls have ever been found inside one of these pots, and the design seems overly complex for a simple container. We have found about a dozen of these objects. They are a technology that appears fully formed and then disappears. There is no record of what they were for. They are a 2,000-year-old power source without a known application. If they were used for electroplating, why is the evidence for ancient electroplated objects so scarce and debatable? If they were for religious rituals, why haven't we found them in temple sites connected to statues? And if they were just for storing scrolls, why the specific combination of iron and copper, the two key components of a galvanic cell? Number 4. What is the message of the Nazca Lines? In the arid coastal plain of Peru, there is a desert that is one of the driest places on Earth. Etched into the surface of this desert is a series of enormous drawings. They are called the Nazca Lines. There are hundreds of them. Some are simple geometric shapes, straight lines, triangles, spirals, and trapezoids. Others are giant pictures of animals, a spider, a hummingbird, a monkey, a lizard. They are so large that they can only be properly seen and appreciated from high up in the air. The lines were made by the Nazca culture, which flourished in the area between 500 BCE and 500 CE. They created the images by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert floor. This revealed the lighter-colored sand underneath. Because the area is so dry, with very little rain or wind, the lines have been preserved, almost perfectly, for nearly 2,000 years. The mystery of the Nazca Lines is simple. Why did they make them? What was the purpose of creating giant drawings that they themselves could not see from the ground? For decades, this question has produced some of the most imaginative theories in archaeology. The most famous came from Erich von Daniken. He suggested the lines were runways for alien spaceships. The giant, flat trapezoids did look a bit like modern airport runways. It was a thrilling idea, but one with no evidence to support it. A more scientific approach was taken by a German mathematician and archaeologist named Maria Reiche. She dedicated her life to studying and preserving the lines, starting in the 1940s. She believed the lines were a giant astronomical calendar. She argued that many of the lines aligned with the rising and setting of the sun, moon, and important stars on key dates, like the solstices. The animal figures, she believed, might represent constellations. Her theory was that the Nazca people used the desert as a massive observatory to track the seasons for agriculture. While some alignments have been found, later statistical analysis showed that the number of astronomical alignments is not much greater than what you'd expect by pure chance. Another prominent theory focuses on water. The Nazca Desert is incredibly dry. Where water was life. Researchers like David Johnson have proposed that the lines are a giant map of underground water sources. The trapezoids and other shapes point to the location of wells and aqueducts. The animal figures could be symbols of water-related gods or spirits. This theory connects the lines to the most vital resource for the Nazca people. It's a compelling idea, but it's hard to prove definitively. A more recent idea is that the lines were ceremonial pathways. People would walk along the lines as part of religious rituals or pilgrimages. The act of walking the sacred path was the important thing, not seeing the image from above. Archaeologists have found pottery and other offerings at the points where lines intersect, which supports the idea of ritual use. The gods, who were in the sky, would have been the intended audience for the giant images. Despite all these theories, no single one can explain all the lines. Some might be astronomical. Some might be related to water, some might be ritual paths. They were likely created over a period of 1,000 years, and their purpose could have changed over time. The Nazca Lines are not one mystery. They are a collection of hundreds of mysteries drawn on the earth for gods or reasons we may never fully understand. How did the Nazca artists manage to create such massive and proportionally accurate figures without being able to see them from above? If the lines were meant for the gods, what belief system demanded such a monumental and labor-intensive form of worship? And could the lines have a function that we are not even capable of imagining, a purpose tied to a worldview so different from our own that we can't decipher its logic? Number 3, what does the Voynich manuscript say? In the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, there is a book that nobody can read. It's called the Voynich manuscript. It is a handwritten and illustrated book from the early 15th century as confirmed by carbon dating. It has about 240 pages. The text is written in an unknown alphabet, a script that appears nowhere else in the world. And the illustrations are bizarre. They show strange, unidentifiable plants. They show astrological charts and zodiac signs. They show what look like biological diagrams of microscopic cells. And most famously, they show pages of small naked women bathing in pools connected by an intricate network of pipes. The book is named after Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer who acquired it in 1912. Since then, Some of the world's best cryptographers and codebreakers have tried to decipher it. This includes the top American and British codebreakers from World War I and World War II, like William Friedman. Every single one of them has failed. The text seems to have all the statistical properties of a real language. It follows certain rules. Some letters appear more often than others. Some letter combinations are common, while others are rare. It's not just random gibberish. It has structure. But what is the structure? There are three main theories. The first is that the manuscript is written in a real but unknown language. The language has been disguised using a special alphabet. If this is the case, it could be a lost language from Europe or Asia. But no one has been able to match its patterns to any known language family. The second theory is that the manuscript is a coded text. The text we see is not the real message. It's an encrypted version of a known language, like Latin or German. The author used a complex cipher to hide the meaning. People have tried every kind of historical cipher imaginable, from simple substitution ciphers to more complex ones. None have worked. The patterns in the text don't seem to match any known encryption method from that period. The third theory is the most disappointing. It's that the whole thing is a brilliant, elaborate hoax. The idea is that someone in the 15th or 16th century created a fake manuscript to sell to a rich collector, like the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who was known to be fascinated by alchemy and secrets. The creator just wrote down nonsense text that looked real and drew strange pictures to make it seem mysterious and valuable. The problem with the hoax theory is the text itself. It's too complex. It follows subtle linguistic rules like Zipf's law, which describes word frequency in natural languages. It would have been incredibly difficult for a forger from that era to create a fake text with that level of statistical sophistication. Recent research using artificial intelligence has suggested that the language might be a form of archaic Hebrew. But the proposed translations are still garbled and don't make much sense. The manuscript remains an enigma. The strange plants don't match any known species. The astronomical charts are unlike any standard system. The purpose of the Bathing Women is a complete mystery. It is a book full of information that we cannot access. A locked room in the House of History. If it's a real language, what culture created it and then vanished without a trace? If it's a code, what secret was so important that it required the invention of a new unbreakable cipher? And if it's a hoax, how did a medieval forger create a text so linguistically complex that it has baffled supercomputers and the world's best code breakers for a century? Number 2. Who made the Antikythera mechanism? In the year 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers was sheltering from a storm near the island of Antikythera. When the storm passed, they decided to dive in the area. What they found was a Roman-era shipwreck, full of statues and other treasures. The next year, archaeologists began to recover artifacts from the wreck. Among the marble statues and pottery, they found a lump of corroded bronze. It looked like a piece of rock. It sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for months unnoticed. Then, it broke apart, revealing something extraordinary inside. There were gears, dozens of them, intricate, precisely cut bronze gears. This was the Antikythera mechanism. The shipwreck dated to around 60 BCE, but the device itself seemed much older, from around 200 BCE. For decades, scientists had no idea what it was. The technology was too advanced. Nothing like it was known to exist for another 1,500 years. The complex clockwork of medieval cathedrals was considered the peak of early gear-based technology. This device was from a completely different world. It was an anachronism, a piece of high-tech from a low-tech era. It wasn't until the 1970s that a historian of science named Derek DeSola Price used X-ray technology to study the corroded fragments. He discovered that it was an astronomical calculator, a kind of ancient analog computer. Over the last 2 decades, with modern 3D scanning and high-resolution imaging, a project led by Tony Freeth and others has revealed its true complexity. The Antikythera mechanism was not just a simple calendar. It was a sophisticated model of the cosmos. A hand crank on the side turned the whole system. The front dial showed the position of the sun and the moon in the zodiac. It also had a pointer for each of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. This was a huge surprise. The ancient Greeks knew the planets moved in strange looping paths. Modeling this, especially for the inner planets, requires incredibly complex gear arrangements. The mechanism had it. The back dials were even more amazing. One was a calendar for predicting solar and lunar eclipses based on a cycle known as the Saros cycle. The other dial tracked the timing of the Olympic Games and other major pan-Hellenic festivals. It was a complete guide to the heavens and the important events on Earth, all in a box the size of a shoebox. It contained at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. The teeth on the gears were cut with incredible precision. One gear even used a pin and slot mechanism to model the variable speed of the moon's orbit. This level of mechanical engineering was thought to be impossible for the ancient world. It was a technology that was discovered, perfected, and then completely lost. The knowledge behind it vanished for over a millennium. We don't know who built it. Some speculate it could have been the astronomer Hipparchus, or perhaps it was made in a workshop on the island of Rhodes, which was a center for astronomy and engineering. But we have no other examples, no simpler prototypes, no text describing how to build such a device. It appears out of nowhere, single, miraculous survivor. It forces us to ask what else the ancient Greeks might have built. What other technologies have been lost to time, waiting at the bottom of the sea? How did the ancient Greeks develop the theoretical knowledge and the precision manufacturing skills to build such a complex device? Was this a one-of-a-kind masterpiece, or were there many of them, and this is just the only one we have found? And, most importantly, how could this entire branch of advanced mechanical engineering be so completely lost that nothing like it appeared again in Europe for 1,500 years? Number one, what really lies beneath the Bosnian pyramids. In 2005, an author and amateur archaeologist named Samir Osmanagic was visiting the town of Visoko, northwest of Sarajevo in Bosnia. He noticed that the hills surrounding the town had a strange regular shape. One of them, Visoceta Hill, looked like a perfect pyramid. It had 4 triangular faces, a flat top, and clear corners. Osmanagic, who had written books about ancient civilizations, became convinced that this was not a natural hill. He believed it was a giant man-made pyramid hidden under a layer of soil and vegetation. He called it the Pyramid of the Sun. Soon, he claimed to have found more. He identified 4 other nearby hills as smaller pyramids, naming them the Pyramid of the Moon, the Dragon, the Earth, and Love. He proposed that they were part of a massive ancient complex built by a lost European civilization around 12,000 years ago. This would make them the oldest and largest pyramids on Earth, dwarfing the pyramids of Egypt. The story became a global sensation. Osmanagic started a foundation and began excavations. His team claimed to have found stunning evidence. They uncovered what they said were large, rectangular blocks of high-quality concrete covering the slopes of the Pyramid of the Sun. They said analysis showed this concrete was superior to modern Roman concrete. They discovered a network of underground tunnels, which they named the Ravni tunnels, that they believe connect the pyramids. Inside the tunnels, they found large, smooth ceramic blocks and strange inscriptions. They also made claims about energy fields, saying that a beam of electromagnetic energy was being emitted from the top of the Pyramid of the Sun. The scientific and archaeological community, however, has been overwhelmingly critical. Mainstream geologists and archaeologists from Europe and America have condemned the project as a cruel hoax. They say there is no evidence of any man-made structures. The pyramid is a natural geological formation called a flatiron. The hills around Visoko are part of a well-understood geological landscape. The concrete blocks are just natural pieces of a type of rock called conglomerate, which is broken off in regular block-like shapes. The ancient tunnels are likely remnants of a medieval mine. The inscriptions are probably just modern graffiti. The European Association of Archaeologists issued a formal protest, calling it a hoax that is doing irreparable damage to real archaeological heritage in the area. They accuse Osmanagic of ignoring scientific evidence and promoting pseudoscience for tourism and personal fame. The debate is incredibly polarized. On one side, you have Osmanagic and a team of volunteers and some supportive researchers who believe they have found one of the most important sites in human history. On the other side, you have almost the entire global scientific establishment who say it is nothing but a natural hill. The Bosnian Pyramid Complex is a unique case on this list. For most of the other mysteries, we have a clear, undisputed artifact. A mechanism, a manuscript, a map. We are just debating its meaning or origin. Here, the very existence of the artifact is the debate. Are we looking at a natural hill, or are we looking at a pyramid? The site has become a major tourist attraction, drawing thousands of visitors who believe in the pyramids and their supposed healing energies. The visual evidence is compelling. The hills do look like pyramids, the blocks of stone do look artificial. But geology can create strange tricks of the eye. Without a widespread, independent, and peer-reviewed investigation, the truth remains buried, either under tons of soil and rock or under layers of controversy and sensationalism. Are the thousands of tons of concrete blocks covering the hill a natural geological feature, or are they the casing stones of a real ancient structure? If it is a hoax, is it a deliberate deception or a case of a researcher seeing what he desperately wants to be true? And in the bitter fight between the amateur excavator and the academic establishment, is it possible that the real complex truth of what lies at Visoko is being lost?